Diddle diddle-a-doo, 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 doo-doo, diddle-a-doo, 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 doo-doo-doo-doo.
Yes, I'm very aware a very substantial amount of people claim to care about continuity in Doctor Who, or at least they do when they're complaining about a retcon that they don't agree with or like. Doctor Who continuity is a funny thing, not in a ha-ha way, but in a peculiar way. It practically regenerates almost from story to story. What's considered indisputable canon now may not be considered indisputable canon in the future, and vice versa. Some of the more vocal fans may claim a major change is breaking canon, but that's not the case at all. As legendary Doctor Who writer and former script editor Terence Dix once said, continuity is only what you remember from the previous guy. In other words, not everything that is previously established is set in stone, especially when it will stop you telling an interesting story. Not every contradiction is breaking canon, despite what anyone who is vocal about it might claim. In order to tell a good story, continuity doesn't need to be slavishly followed. The fact that Doctor Who's been contradicting itself practically since day one. The Doctor initially refers to himself and Susan as not being from Ian and Barbara's race.
That could be interpreted in multiple ways.
The first conclusion is that he was saying he's from another race, even though they have yet to actually name the race at this point. But he could have just been over exaggerating, and he was actually from a highly advanced evolution of the human race. This could be further reasoned because of the numerous times after he was referred to as human. One prime example is in the second Doctor story of The Evil of the Daleks, where one of the Daleks refers to him as more than human. That's a weird way to describe it if he is meant to be alien. Considering the Daleks are known for being good at gathering information, it seems weird that they would get the wrong information if he was intended to be an alien at the time. Susan herself once claimed to have come up with the acronym for the TARDIS, and then later it was suddenly used by practically every person on Gallifrey. So either that's an early contradiction, or Susan for some reason saw the need to lie and say that she came up with the acronym for the TARDIS. Even in the first episode, it was established that she was willing to tell the truth about the past because she travelled through time and space with her grandfather.
Not to mention the Doctor once implied that he created the TARDIS himself.
Even if you don't count those contradictions, the next one is harder to ignore. The Daleks are the emperors of contradiction. In their initial appearance, the Doctor seems to have no prior knowledge of them. But why is this a contradiction? Because not only would future stories suggest that the Daleks are notorious throughout time and space and the galaxy, but on Gallifrey, there's a children's story about them. Now, the Doctor could just assume that they've been made up, but to not even have heard of them in any way and seem to be unfamiliar with them entirely. Not only that, but within their own personal timeline, there's a contradiction with the Daleks. For the first 10 years or so, there was no mention of a creator, like Davros.
Yes, he wasn't created till about 10 years into the show.
That the Daleks didn't really have a specific creator. In fact, it was heavily implied they just kind of appeared out of nowhere
And were merely machines.
and that's just in the mainline TV show, as numerous alternative origins have been established in official spin-off media, such as in TV comics, where they were created by an entirely different race and were essentially just robots or automatons. Then there's the destruction of Skaro. The first time it was destroyed, in the second Doctor story, The Evil of the Daleks, it was suggested that that was the end of Skaro. Flash forward to the seventh Doctor story,
Remembrance of the Daleks.
and it was highly suggested the Hand of Omega, held by the Doctor, was the reason why the planet Skaro was destroyed. In the revived series, it was changed again to suggest that the Skaro was destroyed during the Time War. The Daleks have had more final ends than the average retiring pop star. Then you've got the contradictory timeline of the Cybermen. In the classic series alone, for the first decade or so of their existence, in real life at least, the look changed practically every appearance. I know what you're thinking. How is that a contradiction, Gazaraki? Well, if each story took place in chronological order, that would be fine, but they weren't all set in chronological order. For example, the Moonbase is set in 2070, where they have their first change of appearance. Then Tomb of the Cybermen would be set roughly 500 years in the future,
Where they'd
only be slightly changed. Then Revenge of the Cybermen, which is set between the two stories, they apparently changed from that appearance to another appearance and then back in the space of 500 years. So either the emotionless Cybermen changed themselves back and forth almost all the time over 500 years, or that's a continuity error. Then you have the planet of origin of the Cybermen. In the first appearance, during the story The 10th Planet, they were from Earth's previously unknown twin, Mondas. Then a few stories later, it was suggested that they were actually from Telos, an entirely different planet. Then a few decades later, it was suddenly, no, Telos is their second planet, and Mondas is the original. Not to mention, it was initially implied that the specific set of circumstances on Mondas, or Telos, or whatever planet they were currently from, only happened on their planet. Then apparently, any race could become Cybermen with no interaction with the Cybermen under similar circumstances. So Doctor Who has been for a long time a TV show which was pretty fast and loose with their continuity. The Time Lords are also guilty of inconsistencies, as if they are constantly using TARDISes to rewrite their own timeline. Before the first regeneration, there was no indication that his race, which was still not outright established as being an entirely different race from humans, had the ability to regenerate in the first place. Now it was later established that the Doctor was the first Time Lord to regenerate. That would be fine.
At least in released order.
But despite the Timeless Child retcon, other people had regenerated before this first regeneration. And then there was the fact that Doctor didn't seem to be confident that he'd get through life-threatening situations up until that point, even though supposedly he knew he could regenerate. When his race was finally shown in the War Games, they were displayed as gods and small in numbers. Then when they appeared again, being a Time Lord seemed to be more like being a member of Starfleet, until they would suddenly be boring politicians whose only advantage over humans was the ability to regenerate. Another aspect of the Time Lords that was regenerated eventually was the number of hearts they had. As far back as the third story, The Edge of Destruction, it was suggested that he only had one. And later, it was established that the Time Lords had two. Yes, there's a popular fan theory that Time Lords don't get a second heart until their first regeneration, which would be fine if it wasn't later established that, despite that contradiction, the first Doctor had two hearts, according to later continuity. People claim the later retcon makes it alright, and it does. But these same people claim any retcon they don't like is breaking canon. What's ludicrous about it is both the Two Hearts retcon and the Timeless Child retcon, one is accepted and one is hated. Because in some fans' minds, there's a statute of limitations of what continuity is valid. If you're a fan who's so adamant that major changes are breaking canon, that you shouldn't really be watching past the early 60s, you'll miss a load of classic episodes, including some from the Revive series, but that would be the case. Established canon should be a guideline, not a template that must be adhered to
Regardless of contradiction.
or changes to the continuity. If you're too worried to do the storyline you want to tell because you might contradict continuity, you have a continuity that is very uniform and might as well be assembled on an assembly line. There's also a fact that a lot of less well-received retcons are often soon forgotten in future eras, such as the Doctor being half human that was revealed in the 1996 TV movie, which was quickly forgotten when it came back. So essentially, retcons that aren't well received will be ignored. And if you don't specifically like one of them, the show itself will probably forget it in a few seasons. Essentially, there's been very few, if any, moments in Doctor Who canon that weren't contradicted at least once at some point after it was established. When people get annoyed about contradictions and say it was breaking canon or it's against established law, often what people mean is, I don't like that contradiction or continuity change, so it's less valid. Not to mention, much of the established law wasn't established prior to it becoming established law. Very rarely is a statement of something contradicting continuity,
Is followed by.
but it's okay because I like it anyway. As much as I personally love the franchise, I'm not going to let a piece of contradicting continuity ruin my enjoyment of the show. As much as people would like to think that Doctor Who has always been about everything being connected and making sense, it's not like it's ever had a 10-year plan like the MCU or the upcoming DCU. Doctor Who, at its core, is just a fun show. It doesn't take itself too seriously or continuity itself. It's a franchise that doesn't let canon get in the way of storytelling. If it never tried anything new, because it may contradict canon, some of the most widely approved continuity changes may have never happened. I'm not saying as a Doctor Who fan you need to like everything that ever happens,
But
invalidating a piece of continuity because you personally don't like it is weird. Not because you don't have the right to, but doing so is like saying anyone who is fine with that piece of continuity is not allowed to like it. Even if it's not people's intention by doing so, it's how it comes across to any fan who isn't as bothered about continuity being perfect. This mindset frustrates me, and it's the mindset that stops new fans from wanting to join the franchise. If you ask someone to name a franchise that didn't have contradictions, intentional or otherwise, I bet they wouldn't be able to come up with a franchise. So basically, who cares about continuity in Doctor Who? I'm sure there's a vocal amount of people that do. Despite that, my advice is don't let continuity, not being perfect, decide for you whether you like the show or not. So who cares about Doctor Who continuity? Not me, because expecting every aspect of the show to be perfect and never contradict itself when it's been going 50 plus years with multiple different people in charge is a ridiculous thing to respect.
well, that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, that's all right too. People are allowed to have different opinions. Yeah. Like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, Gazaraki the Geek out. Also, there's probably videos coming up now that you might want to watch if you enjoyed this one, or you want to see what other videos I did, because I don't just do Doctor Who ones. It's just I do Doctor Who ones at the moment because of my themed month. Yeah, Gazaraki the Geek out again.